Greetings, Summoners. Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Battle Spirits Saga video. And today we're going to be doing something, well, a little bit different. So if you've been following the channel and the community tab updates, we've already seen green, purple, mid-range, arguably more control kind of pop up and have a couple different variations. I recently did the deck profile on Blade Beast, which I went undefeated at Sword Champs with, and then played some extra games with, and still went undefeated with. It was just very solid at what I wanted to be doing. Obviously, a lot more testing to be done, but it was a very solid mid-range style of approach because it takes a little bit of time to set up that Blade Beast combo. And then I really wanted to get a video together to highlight the last part of green because we have the online events coming up. We have the grand opens around the corner, and I'm not sure when someone might play this deck and have more time to refine it, but it is something I think that is a good enough shell to start to work off of so that if you are someone who says, hey, I wanted to play something like white aggro, right? Just very low to the ground, but now it just has a bunch of 4K attackers. Well, green aggro is pretty sick, at least on paper, for what it wants to be doing, right? Where white has the option to have a bunch of these low to the ground attackers. Green just says, okay, but what if our guys were also just really, really big and made blocking difficult? So I think as we go forward and as set 2 starts to develop, we are going to be seeing a lot more of this green aggro style of deck over, say, the white aggro list that we've seen in set 1. Now, I will say, with both decks, you probably still don't want absolute Ice Shield. You're trying to end the game on turn 2 or turn 3, and if your opponent stabilizes, you lose. That's how aggro goes, right? And in a time where Burning Force is going to be a 4 of in basically every single possible deck, having a bunch of 4K threshold attackers is a pretty good spot to be, right? Where white aggro will automatically fold if they try to go wide. You can get multiple of your spirits in green to be 4K reasonably well. That says, hey, well, sorry that Burning Force in your hand is super dead. And obviously, you know, white still has things like Bullet Ray that can make it really good, but I wanted to at least, again, put together a shell that people could use for green. And of course, we might see even a white-green aggro list up here, right? And talk about, okay, let's just take the best thing from both colors and go from there, right? Maybe you find a way to fit in Valkyrie Mist on top of like the good green attackers. Would be really insane to see it happen, but hey, who knows? So without further ado, let's get into it and talk about, well, why does green aggro even possibly exist, right? Like, why are we considering this in terms of what it allows our decks to be doing? And first and foremost, it's going to be Map Butterfly, which is a 0 cost and obviously, well, no reduction because it's just free. But it also has that green symbol, so it helps line up your other spirits. So there is a way that if you have like Map Butterfly, then like 2 cost reductions, right? Or some other way to make them free, right? Or 1 cost 1 reductions. You can now, in theory, just open up a hand where it's like, oh, you played a Nexus turn 1? Well, I'm sorry. 5 cards, 5 cores, you're dead, right? Now, obviously, there's interaction, there's spells, they could have an Absolute Ice Shield to give them a turn. There's a bunch of things that you could consider to not just automatically die on your turn or before you even get to your turn 2, right? We've seen white aggro do this, so it's nothing new that another deck can be doing it, but I really like what Map Butterfly opens up just because it is effectively ramp for your green reductions, as well as, you know, it doesn't have the problem of the other elementals where it can actually just attack at level 1. Now, again, the downside is, and green desperately needs it, and obviously not in this deck, but in other variations, is there's just no draw at all in green, right? So in some cases, when you're building these like slower green style of decks, you almost wish there was a green elemental, but again, I think a lot of people are just splashing purple. The purple elemental at least lets you cycle the draw. It's still a 0. It helps you play your depths earlier. All that good stuff, right? So another conversation for another video. I'm sure we'll get top 8 lists from this weekend, or at least the grand open. And I'm sure someone's going to do well with green purple. I'm just being honest. I think it's a very, very solid combination. So Map Butterfly is great. And then, of course, with the promos, we have Tin Soldiers, which, again, I really like in yellow because of what it does, how it synergizes with Blessed Cathedral. That's all good, but it's also just a free 5-for-3 attacker, right? So this can be splashed into any and all aggro decks going forward because it's just free with no attack restrictions. And kind of the same thing with Map Butterfly, right? If we think about when blue comes out, right, maybe there's going to be a blue 0 or a blue elemental that gets introduced at that time, we would then have, in theory, right, 12 0 attackers or 0 cost attackers that any deck could run. And disclaimer, right, in Japanese Battle Spirits, this did eventually become a problem where there was just too many free spirits and not enough good spells to counteract that. Now, we do have things like Flame Trident, we have, various kind of AoE style effects that can help us, 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 our opponent in some situations. But I'm not exactly the biggest fan of those cards, at least for how it's lining up, because again, green can quite easily just be like, okay, well, my guys are 4Ks instead. I don't care about your 2K or 3K base removal. So that's not a good spot to be either. I do think this forces people to not be as greedy with their decks, which is perfectly fine, right? We don't want to just have top end, like the launch events for those that are around during that time. You don't want to just have super greedy top end decks and nobody keep them in check. That's why we saw Rex do Rex things and, come back in the meta. And with that same regard, Dino Man and Flamefish and Burning Forces can all be really good out of red to help stabilize against decks like these. But again, that's just kind of like an overall, why talk about green aggro at all, or why talk about aggro decks in this format? Well, it really is just these two cards, and I think because of Matte Butterfly being a green reduction and then also giving you Needle Shot and Thorn Prison, that's kind of where you want to be anyways, so I want to put together a green aggro video, and again, also just have like the third and final archetype for green represented on the channel somewhere, right? So we have the green aggro deck list for this one. We have the Blade Beast, which is more of your mid-range style setup combo deck, and then we have the green purple that was featured on the community tab in the other part of YouTube. So again, all three of those kind of archetypes for green are out there, and I'm sure we'll see more variations. White green control is out there somewhere, but at least these are like the building blocks to go forward for the rest of set 2. All right, let's get into some of the other cards. Leaf Wolf, which I was very, very wrong about because I was not thinking about this from a aggro application. I'll just admit that up front, right? So Leaf Wolf, by all accounts, is a pretty pathetic Swift Spirit, right? 2 costs, 1 reduction, not good BP thresholds. It's just kind of whatever when you look at it. However, when you think about this from a aggro application and suddenly you go, okay, well, I attack with my first guy to remove a blocker, you kill it, I put 2 cores into my reserve, I swing with something else, and then I can flash in Leaf Wolf. In the terms of other card games, right, this would just be a burn spell. Like, this is just another card that's going to pop out of your hand that says, okay, well, you've already blocked these 2 guys. Now I have another spirit that I could bring in that you weren't planning on, right? So it just extends your damage. So again, in at least the traditional card game terms, because we don't have any burn effects, no burn magic effects I need to specify because we have things like Elk, right? Yet, this is about the closest as we are going to get. Now, of course, in the future, we will have burn effects on attack directly tied to spirits, but that's another topic for another video. As of right now, at least Leaf Wolf is going to get the job done. And again, because your opponent had already went to blocks or they've already tried to use some of the removal, like, you don't care that this is only a 2K. It is just purely for getting another attacker in, which is also cool because the finalist pack being that, like, all mono green or monochrome green or whatever that style is called, like, it's pretty funny. So now I kind of want to get 4 promo Leaf Wolves because I think they just will find a spot in these aggro style of decks long term. And it's no mock G to make that reference for the Japanese Battle Spirits fans, but I think it's good enough and at least balanced for what we have. And again, with the Insectoid X Rare, we could see a Swift insect deck at some point as well. Getting into some of the more interesting 3-drops, and kind of one of the things I always liked about white aggro that green aggro can do as well, right? With white aggro, you start with Peggy Scion, and your opponent doesn't automatically know what you're playing unless they have some inside knowledge. And it's the same thing with Worker Ant-Man and Mustrantula. Worker Ant-Man has just been an MVP. It is honestly top 5 cards in green. Absolutely insane. Everyone should be trying it in their list, etc., etc. The fact that it's a 2 for 4K is insane. It ramps you, which is really great because if you want to try to line up like your Leaf Wolves or have extra cores so you can also play your magic on following turns, Ant-Man just does it all. And then what's really nice about Mustrantula, at least in this list in particular, it basically becomes a removal spell plus an attacker, right? And anytime you can do that in any other style of deck, you're automatically going to be playing 4 of them. So I really like this idea that there are going to be hands where your opponent mulligans, you go first, you say, okay, turn 1, Mustrantula, now you're down to 4 cards at the start of your turn, and you probably have to discard some of your, either a Nexus, or you might not even discard a Nexus because you don't know what your opponent's playing yet, but you probably discard things like Elephant because you're trying to stabilize, or any of your top end in general. So I really like that. It's something that can be aggressive enough early just for the fact that you're playing it early, but then also can hit one of your stabilization pieces from your opponent. So I think it's already on the rise. I think it's like $250 for a rare, which, again, not expensive in card game terms at all. But I think more and more people are starting to realize, like, oh, this is a card I want 4 of and I want foils of. Like, I very much expect the foil version of this little tarantula to get up to $5 or $6. I think it is absolutely correct. And it was even better than I thought it was going to be in testing. So ultimately, I think this is going to make the list because of just how strong it is, just getting your opponent to play this, play a hand control style of deck, right? When they're already going to be low on resources, they're going to try to flood the board and put all their spirits out when they have only maybe 1 card left in hand that's a magic. Well, then you summon the Musk Tarantula, rip their Burning Force out of their hand, and then suddenly now they're dead on spot, right? So getting multiple of these early in the game can be quite backbreaking depending on what type of deck your opponent's playing. So again, huge fan of both these cards. Expect to see them in a lot more green lists going forward, and we'll see how these lists evolve over time. Of course, why play green, right? Why have all these green reductions? And it's got to give it up to the very, very strong Magic Thorn Prison. That was the one that was made a lot of plays in Gen Con or on Gen Con weekend. And obviously, it's going to be a very strong card going forward. And then I got to give up for Needle Shot as well, because it is a 1-cost tap effect. And what I really, 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 really like about Needle Shot on paper in this list is that you as the player gets to choose. So we have a bunch of, 4K attackers, which are really strong early game. But if we give our opponent that early core advantage and they're able to play something a little bit bigger, well, we don't want to lose our spirits. So now we can Needle Shot their bigger threat and still force them to lose their lower spirits, which opens up more opportunities on the following turn. Now, again, if they have 2 spirits, then just play Thorn Prison and get them both out of the way and then swing for game. But I do think there is a noteworthy difference in being 1 cheaper in Needle Shot, as well as letting you, the player, choose what you want to exhaust, especially if they have something like a Buffalong Bill or something that's going to get even more value out of blocking and they maybe establish more of a go wide board. I think Needle Shot can just be really, really important in helping you develop. And not too much time that I wanted to spend on it, but Capricorn is a 1-cost 1 reduction that during your opponent's attack step lets you get 1 core back. Well, if your opponent ever goes, oopsies, I'm going to try to attack you for a card draw or for some other type of effect, right? You can go, okay, you get that 1 attack, but now I'm going to Needle Shot because you gave me a core back by going into combat. Now, again, at some point, your opponent's going to have to attack you, so that's going to come up at some point. But it is just a nice way to remove some additional blockers. And then, as we saw Dream Bomb being absolutely insane in white aggro, I think the Ant Strike Back is going to be the true MVP. And also, it's green, right? So you would think like, oh, you get the reduction, but the burst effect allows you to just play it for free. But then also more importantly, if we think about aggro decks going forward, this is just get 2 guys for free. And yes, they do come into play exhausted. So you can't, just swing out, go crazy and they're like, oh, haha, I use my burst, there's 2 more attackers, right? It does require a little bit more of planning, but if your opponent tries to destroy something on their turn, especially by an attack, right? If they have, a King Dragno, or if they have the new Photon Dragon, or just there's a myriad of things like a Confront Spirit, right? You go, okay, well, you removed 1 thing, and now I'm going to have 2 more spirits, right? So kind of in the same theory of Leaf Wolf and just being able to extend your attacks, the Ant Strikes Back just gets you that option as well, because now it is 2 attackers in 1 card, even if, yes, it does require a little bit of setup. But it is interesting to see how this is going to change how some decks want to be played out. So I think Ant Strike Back, it's also a Store Champ promo, so hey, get your Store Champ promos early while you can. I definitely think this card is going to be a 4 of in some lists in the future, just because of how strong that swing can be. And then, of course, there's just like the Ants token style of deck, which I think is also fine, that wants to run this card, but that is going to be a much different list. It's going to be quite a bit slower than this style of green aggro, but still with the tools that you have available, especially with Queen at the top end, giving you 3 attackers out of nowhere. I definitely think there's something there, but again, different topic for a different video. That's more, again, falls into really that mid-range style of green where it's like, okay, now we have the problem that I mentioned in the Blade Beast video. It's like where it's, all right, here's all the good mid-game green stuff that we're going to be playing, much like purple is like, oh, here's our mid-range purple stuff that we want to be playing. And green does suffer that between now what we would call the Blade Beast deck versus the Ants deck has a lot of overlap, at least in my early testing and brews of them, because there's just like good stuff that you want to be playing in both lists. But again, we only have 1 set worth of green cards, as we've seen with all the other 4 colors in set 2. The decks do start to divide or diverge significantly from one another now that we have more cards in the pool. So I'm sure we will see that again with set 3 and then 4, and then obviously, or set 4 being the first set where every color now has a dedicated. Everyone's getting a new, archetype or card support, what have you. So I think set 4 is going to be a really good spot for the game. Format health-wise, because you're going to see all these unique decks really start to pop up time and time again. And then I got to give a shout out to my boy Koju. I really like this card. Yes, it is a tournament promo, much like Tin Soldiers, but I like this because, one, it's just good in the, Carapace and Insectoid deck. And then also it is a 4K attacker that also needle shot something on play. So anytime that you have a magic effect attached to a body, which again, everything has haste sort of thing, I think that's a very good spot to be. So obviously you don't want to play too many of these because you only want to draw one of them over the course of the game to be like the extra needle shot you needed plus an attacker. So I think 3 is the right number. And then in some crazy non-zero existent world, right, we do have a number of the Carapites, so there is a way to protect it from core removal. Your opponent's probably dead before that ever matters, right? Like if they curse dragon you, they probably already curse dragon you before you could set this up. So I don't expect that the level 2-3 split ever comes up all that often. You really are just playing this for the, needle shot plus attacking body combo. And then the real man of the set, who is going to be annoying a lot of people, I'm sure, is Arcana Joker. We've seen this a lot out of the yellow list in various brews that are coming up. But truthfully, this is something that you can just splash into any and every aggro deck because it is just a unblockable attacker. And a lot of times you are going to be able to get your opponent down to, 1 life and just need something to close it out. So this can be that card for you. And again, it is a little bit expensive at 5, but it is still, easier to play than Durham Dyna. And again, you just want to have that 1 point of unblockable damage. So this can get down, quite a couple turns early compared to Durham Dyna, unless you're playing the white aggro version. So I think Arcana Joker just kind of takes that spot. And also it's a Judge promo. So I look forward to, getting the Judge promo versions where I can. And with that, we are at the end of the green aggro list. Again, this is a work in progress, disclaimer, untested, unrefined, etc., etc., etc. I just really wanted to get a list out there so people could start brewing with it, because I know there are people who like the more all-in aggressive strategies, and I do think that we are going to see green kind of take the spotlight away from the white aggro list. You can play both. That's the other thing. I think it is still very reasonable to play white aggro, but between the two of them, I do like green a bit more. You just have much better attackers overall, and the tap down effects, as we've seen, can be very, very strong when you're just trying to stabilize that. Just removing 2 attackers or blockers is just insanely good flexibility options to have. So with that, good news I'll kind of put here at the end as well. The other reason why I want to get this out is because it sounds like next week we have some recordings planned, as well as trying to go back to some Shadowverse Evolve recordings, because I'm actually about to head out the door for a qualifier, which unfortunately probably won't fire, but I'm just trying to do my part. Shadowverse Evolve hopefully will have better organized play in year 2, but it is a fun game, and I was trying to help out some locals with it. But from that going forward, it looks like it's just going to be all Battle Spirits Saga related stuff. And obviously I'm going to Tulsa now, so I'm very excited to see everybody in Tulsa. No idea what I'm playing yet. Obviously, I've just been trying to work on fun brews to showcase for set 2. So I'm probably just going to play whatever somebody hands me for a deck and do our best from there. But with that, my friends, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Make sure to stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.